In this tutorial, we will see how to use Microsoft Visio to draw a relational database design. That's the picture that you see in front of you. So I will show you how to use the software to draw a design like this. But before we dive into that, some preliminary background information just to refresh your memory. So you remember that the database development process has two major steps. One step is the conceptual database design or conceptual data model development, where you identify the structure of the database using entities and relationships. And we have seen how to do that in earlier classes. And then once we came up with the model, we saw how to represent those entities and relationships using the crow's foot notation. And in one of our earlier tutorials, I had shown you how to draw that particular diagram using Visio. That's a picture that you see in front of you. So the database structure was represented at a fairly high level, and the main thing to identify there was what are the entities and what are the relationships. You may remember that there were binary relationships, which are most of them. Some relationships can be unary or recursive relationships. And then relationships had cardinalities with them. There's one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, and so forth. Okay. And that structure of the database was represented in this ER diagram, or entity relationship model, or the conceptual data model. There is not a whole lot of detail here. The main detail that you see here is the structure, namely what are the entities and what are the relationships. Then in the second stage of database development, we took this ER diagram, or this entity relationship model, or otherwise called this conceptual data model, and transformed it into a relational database design. So that's the picture that I was showing you a minute ago. And you can see similarities and differences between this picture and the ER diagram that I just showed you. Similarities in the sense that you can see that there are similar entities. There's a department entity, there's employee, there's project. Okay, but I hope you are also noticing that there is a lot more detail in this design, in this relational database design, simply because we are getting closer and closer to actual implementation using a specific database management package. And the rules for converting an entity relationship diagram into a relational database design, I will not go over again because we have covered them in a previous class, but I'll just point out some differences as a result of those rules. So you may remember that in the entity relationship diagram, let me just show you once again, there was a many-to-many relationship between employee and project. Namely, one employee could work on multiple projects and one project could have multiple employees. So there was a many-to-many relationship between employee and project. And then when we got to the relational database design, since all we have available to us are foreign keys, that single many-to-many relationship is represented as a pair of one-to-many relationships. So here's one of them, from employee to this entity called assignment, and another one-to-many relationship from project to assignment. And this new entity assignment captures that many-to-many relationship. So hopefully, just pictorially, I hope you're seeing that a major difference between the relational database design and the entity relationship model is that there's a whole lot more detail that you have to work into the relational database design. Okay, so with those preliminaries, let me start Visio and we will get going. And just as a heads up, this might take a while, so what I may do is, as we go along, I'll keep track of time, and if the tutorial gets too long, I'll cut it off in the middle and I'll start a fresh video, okay, and not make this one video too long. Okay, so here's the when you start out Microsoft Visio, you may recall that when we were drawing the entity relationship diagram using the crow's foot notation, this is the template that we used, the crow's foot template, okay, in Visio. This time, when we are going to draw the relational database design, the relational database model, we will not use this particular template. Instead, we will use the database model template. So let me click on that. So be sure to start off with the correct template. So it starts off pretty much the same way. I choose US units and I hit create. and I get pretty much the same dialog box, rather the same screen that we got when we were drawing the ER model using crowsfoot. Now, this little dialog box that you see in the middle over here, Visio has a feature where you can reverse engineer a conceptual database model from an actual database, whether it's an Oracle database or a Microsoft Access database. But we're not going to do that in this class, in this course. So I just hit cancel. And when you look at the screen, you can see some of the components of the screen are pretty much identical to what you saw for the crowsfoot template. You can see the tool icons on top over here for the various fonts and italics and so forth. You can see the tools that are here up on top. So the ribbon, the menu choices and the tools up on top are very similar to what you saw with the crowsfoot notation. You also have the 8.5 by 11 blank sheet of paper in the middle where you're going to actually draw the diagram. Okay, but you can see at the bottom over here a new box has popped up, okay, which says database properties, and here you will start filling in a lot more detail. I told you a few minutes ago that one of the major differences between drawing the relational database design and the ER model is that there is a whole lot more detail that you have to fill in. So as we work our way through the example, we will see how those details are filled in. Now, the left side of the screen should be familiar to you because some of these tools, these are the tools you will use to draw the diagram. So some of these tools should be familiar to you already. For example, you again see an entity tool. You also had this tool in the crowsfoot template. It looked a little different. It was bluish colored box, but here it looks a little different, but you still have the entity tool. Similarly, you have a relationship tool. You did have the relationship tool in the crowsfoot template as well. So those two are common, but you can see a few more. For example, you see this tool called view, which may not have been there. I don't think it was there in the crowsfoot notation. More importantly, you can see category, parent to category, category to child. These are tools that you have not seen in your crowsfoot template, and I will show you gradually towards the end how and when those particular tools are used. But these are the tools that we will use to draw our relational database model. The two main ones that we will use are entity and relationship. And I think if you recall, if you think back to our tutorial on the crowsfoot model building using Visio, the process of drawing a relational database design now will be very similar, that we will drag and drop tools from here over to the sheet on the right, and then we'll start filling in details. The main difference is you will have to fill in a lot more detail. So let me make sure I keep that particular picture in front of us. So this is the picture that I'm going to try and replicate. So remember, there's department, there's employee number, there's project, and so forth. Okay, so let me start with employee. So I'll start putting in the employee. So let me go back to Visio. I pick up the entity tool and I drop it in over here. Okay, now you may remember that when we were doing the crowsfoot notation, we actually double clicked this box and we started typing in the primary key and attributes inside the box itself, okay, because we didn't have to provide a whole lot of detail. Here, since we are doing the relational database design, we are closer to implementation. There's a lot more detail that has to be provided, and that's done here at the bottom. Okay, so let's gradually do it one by one. So every relation must have a name. So this particular relation is called department, I think. Let me just check once. Yes, I'm sorry, we are doing employee first. Okay, so let's go back to Visio and I will give the name here. You see, I'm in the definition stage here. So I give the name as employee. Okay, now maybe I want it all capitals, let's say. Okay, no particular reason, I just made it all capital, the name of the relation. Okay, so I'm done with one piece. Every entity must have a name. Now I have to go about specifying the attributes. So here we go. I go to columns now. So you remember, in a relation, the attributes are the columns and the rows represent each instance of the entity. So now I'll start defining columns. Okay, so let's go back to my picture here. So the primary key is employee number. Okay. So you can, this is a little bit like Excel over here. I'm just going to widen this column. It's a name. So instead of typing in employee number, let me just type in emp number, just save myself a little bit of typing. So physical employee emp number. Oh, sorry, got to take the caps off. EMP number. Okay, now here is something you didn't have to do when you're doing the entity relationship diagram in Visio. Here you can see I have to specify the character type, and rather the data type. Is employee number is it a number? Is it a character string? Is it a variable character string? Now there are all kinds of data types. So if I click on the data type, you see this drop down button over here. You see here are all the different data types that Visio accommodates. Okay, so again, for no particular reason, I will just say character. So, and let's say instead of character 10, I want to make it 15. I just put my cursor over there, and I'll just make it 5, character 5. Okay, now we're not done yet. So you see this other on the right hand side, it says notes. You can put comments to yourself. What does employee number represent? You can say it's a unique identifier for the employee. Maybe you can say it's exactly 5 characters long. It starts with E, starts with N. So any comment that you want to give that would explain what that column represents, you can put your notes over there. Okay, now before I proceed further, notice one thing. As soon as I put in this attribute called employee number, what Visio has done has put this attribute in the box below this line. So you can guess what this line is. This line on the top separates the primary key from the rest of the attributes. Okay, so if you look at the boxes over here, it says required and PK primary key. Neither of them have been checked. Okay, so Visio doesn't yet know that I want emp number to be the primary key, so it has put it below. Now watch what happens as soon as I click on required. So it makes it boldface. That is a visual reminder to me that this field, this column is required, whether or not it's a primary key. And now as soon as I click on PK, do you see it has moved it up to the primary key box? So that's how Visio knows that emp number is the primary key. Okay, so let's quickly add the remaining attributes now. Let me go back and see what happened here. Okay, so I have first name, last name. Again, I'm going to save myself some typing. I'm going to say F name, and I'll keep it as character 10, and I'll say required. Okay, because I don't want an employee whose first name I don't know. No, it's your choice. You could say I can put in an employee as long as I know their employee number. Then you would not check the required box. Then I have L name also, last name, and I'll keep it at character 10. I'll make it required. And let's see what else we have. We have, now notice that there's a department foreign key over here. We will get to those foreign keys in just a bit, but the other attributes, which are the properties of the employee itself, are phone and email. So let me put those in here. So I'll say phone, and let me make it character 12. So character 12, and that is not required. You can see in the PowerPoint that phone is not boldface, so that's your visual indication that it's not a required field. That means you could have an employee without a phone number, but you can't have an employee without an email. We want every employee must have an email address. It's required. That's, we are specifying that for this design. So let me put email, and I'll make it again, let's say just for no particular reason, I'll make this character 20. Okay, and I'll say required. I'll check the required box. So you can see again, email became boldface. Okay, so I hope you have seen now how to set up an employee. So the process is reasonably similar to what you did for the crow's foot notation ER model in Visio. The main difference is there's a whole lot more detail that you have to provide. Okay, and the detail that we have provided is through these categories on the left hand side. We have defined the entity by calling it, giving it a name employee, and I've identified all the columns. I've identified what the primary ID is. Now, indexes, triggers, these are additional advanced features that we have not discussed in class, so I'm not discussing them here. But indexes, just for those of you who are curious, indexes, you can define indexes on certain fields. Let's say you anticipate that you might have to look up employees by email. Then you might want to index this particular table on email. So index is like your index in your book. When you want to find out a particular topic, you go to the back of the book, you look at the topic, and it tells you which page number to look at. Then index is something similar. It's an added structure that the database management system maintains, and it just helps you speed up your search. Okay, so I think I'm seeing that we already spent 15 minutes on this video. So let me stop this recording at this point, and I will continue from here on the next video.